What's up everyone, this is Dariusz Kalbaczyk, co-founder of MG Poland, JS Poland and AI Poland. Welcome back to the JavaScript Master Podcast. Today we've got a special guest straight from Gdańsk, Poland. Senior software engineer, application architect, Power Grid Gdańsk product development leader at Volue. He is passionate about people, software design and modeling. Ladies and gentlemen, Damian Płaza. Hi Damian, how are you?
Hello, Darek. I'm really glad to be there. Thanks for inviting me.
So for those who don't know you yet, please tell us about yourself and what you do.
I'm Damian. I'm working as a senior software engineer and group leader in the company called Volue. I'm a family man. I have a smart and beautiful wife, 2 kids, and professionally I'm interested in software design, modeling, functional languages, and also I like fighting sports like martial arts.
Damian, what is HTMX and what problems does it aim to solve?
HTMX, I would say to me, it embodies 2 things at the same time. It's a library written in JavaScript that enables developers writing less JavaScript, which is kind of a paradox. And on the other hand, it's also a movement that tries to bring hypermedia-driven applications and enable developers to focus on true REST. And regarding the problems it's trying to solve, I believe they are ones that we created by our own mistakes or maybe evolution, because eventually our web applications became so complex or increasingly complex, and that we need to tame the complexity, and HTMX is one of the responses that emerged from the community.
How does HTMX differ from popular JavaScript frameworks?
This is a very good question because I believe they start from different sides of the same spectrum, because frameworks like React, Angular, or Vue, they typically start in the browser, being heavily based on client-side state management and scripting, and having a clear separation between the server and the client. Whereas HTMX tries to bet on the server and start from the server side, also be able to utilize interactions, but use JavaScript only when it's needed, only to increase the interactivity, not to be the first that we use in order to build apps.
What inspired the creation of HTMX? And what gap in the web development ecosystem does it fill?
I believe that it was a response that emerged from increasing complexity, from modern front-end development that we do. So, all the magical build tools, all the frameworks that are built, bring with them a baggage full of new concepts, full of new ways that we need to understand and acquire. And initially, it came as a library called Intercolor.js, made by Carson Gross. And eventually it was the next phase or an evolution of the Intercolor.js was the HTMX. And in terms of the gap, I believe it tries to find it in its place when you want to build interactive web applications, still having the server in the first place as a first-class citizen that gives you the possibility to still have your interactions, do not have multi-page application full of full-page reloads, but based on the interactions that are given by the HTMX.
Can you explain the concept of hypermedia-driven application in the context of HTMX?
Great questions in that topic, because actually HTMX, it generalizes the hypermedia controls, which was originally proposed by Rolf Fielding in his dissertation, I believe. And when it comes to the difference, because maybe this is the place so that we could compare hypermedia-driven applications and single-page applications, is that typically in the SPAs, we, of course, render everything. Then server is asked by the front end to get some data. Data is sent over the wire using JSON. Then, of course, the web application need to deserialize it, use it, render, have the user interactions, and then send back JSON again. What is big in the difference is that we are sending JSON, which is data, then decisions are on the web application side, SPA, and then we are sending data back. And in the hypermedia-driven applications, server sends both information, which is the semantically organized data, and available interactions with those information. So we are getting a bundle of semantically correct and valid details and interactions. So in a way, server becomes application engine that enables driving the state of the application based on the user interactions. In a way, we can say that it becomes a kind of orchestrator or a guide for a user that basically allows certain transitions, gives the possibility to interact with the application, and based on those interactions, move in certain ways, right? Exploring certain paths. And everything, of course, is related to those hypermedia controls, which are related to user interactions, right? So links, forms, buttons, so all elements that are to interactions. And because of getting these bundled information and behaviors, so interactions, actually we are getting this holy grail of REST, which is H2S, basically means hypermedia as the engine of application state. So that's the conceptual whole, I would say.
How easy is it to get started with HTMX? Do you need any special setup?
The first point, I would say, is that we need to have open mind and also exploratory attitude, because it really differs from how we got used to developing web applications. As mentioned before, SPAs are typically JSON over the wire. And I didn't mention that while answering the previous question, but actually we can just say that HTMX is HTML over the wire. So we are sending semantically correct and valid information organized together with the interactions. So this is a huge leap for the mindset to unlearn what we know. Then basically you need to have a server that is able to respond with HTML. So that's pretty common, I would say. And it doesn't really matter if you use Python, Node.js, C# or whatever. In most cases nowadays, servers are able to respond with the HTML fragments. Then you of course need to include HTMX core JS library, because it's still JavaScript, it's under the hood. And then optionally, I think you can add some CSS framework library, let it be Tailwind, for example, and then you can start your journey, basically. That's the whole point. It's really, really no build steps, the good traditional old way of building applications at your fingertips, I would say. When you try, it suddenly becomes really enlightening when you don't need to have all your webpacks and other building stuff.
What are the most common use cases for HTMX?
I would say that HTMX fits into the place when we have systems or applications full of text, full of media like images, and moderate in terms of high interaction elements. A good example, some might say it's not the best example, but I think Twitter or X nowadays is a perfect example for that, because it has a lot of text, a lot of images. There are some audio, video media. When it comes to high interaction elements like canvas, maps, etc., there is none. So in a way, it's mostly for consuming content, having some interactions, but not that animation heavy. That's why it's a perfect fit. So every application that is related to admin panels, internal tools like dashboards, data-driven applications when you have charts that are rendered once, updated once a while, I think it's a good spot on for HTMX and hypermedia-driven applications in general.
When HTMX might not be a good fit?
Another good question. So of course, and even Carsten Gross, who is the author of that very, not a framework, although he says that of course there are some places where HTMX might not be a silver bullet. There is nothing like this. I would say probably it's exactly what I've mentioned in the previous example. So canvas heavy, map heavy, like Miro, right? Or this kind of applications when you are having a lot of computations on the browser, redrawing, etc. Also, what comes to my mind is actually comes from my experience. I was able to work with the offline first web application, which was based on the PWA technologies. So I can't imagine HTMX working with offline first applications because it's based on the server, right? and server interactions. There are some possibilities like utilizing service workers to kind of mimic server in the browser in a way, but still it might be against the philosophy, so taming the complexity, right? There are certain areas where HTMX might be really like shining winner, but sometimes it's not a good fit, and we just say okay and move on. I believe that in the web development community, or in general application architectures, there is a pattern called islands architecture, when we were trying to isolate some parts of the application because of their like resource demanding or high interactivity. And this is exactly the case for HTMX2. We could potentially create an island of interactivity and basically put like a map or a canvas inside of the bubble and make this interactive island communicate with server using hypermedia controls. So to just send events, that server would be able to reply, and the communication will be done in events, which actually is a native citizen in like a browser. So events devour the world. So it will be just a regular thing.
How does HTMX reduce the amount of client-side JavaScript needed in a project?
Yeah, this is actually one of those questions that might sound like a paradox. We are reducing the amount of client-side JavaScript by including another JavaScript library. So I believe, as mentioned before, that because we are starting from another side of the spectrum, we are trying to make the server first-class citizen and only add interactions when they are needed. So, for example, let's take a canonical case when we have a collapsible panel. You might have this interaction for collapsing or expanding it that done by interacting with the server, not using any like scripting library. That's one thing. Because we are based on the server, we only add JavaScript when it's needed. Comparing that to frameworks like React, when everything is based on the client-side JavaScript.
What is the event model in HTMX, and how does it differ from traditional JavaScript event handling?
Actually, in HTMX uses native JavaScript event model, I could say, but what it adds as an addition are like lifecycle events. So, for example, whenever we are making a request, we are able to use HTMX attributes directly in HTML tags and hook before request. It also extends those events by handling response events after the server responded with the HTML. Also, it gives the possibility to use custom events sent from the server so that we are able to update DOM directly.
Does HTMX support progressive enhancement and older browsers?
So because we have JavaScript only when it's needed, we have much more options to progressively enhance our applications. Also, as far as I know, HTMX was built with IE11 support by definition, because it's written in the JavaScript that is not compatible with ES6+. So in a way, it's using JavaScript that runs on IE11. And that probably speaks for itself, that it's supporting older browsers with the air quotes here.
How strong is the HTMX community, and where can developers find resources or support?
As far as I know, HTMX has its own Discord when people are exchanging thoughts, patterns, practices, and also projects. I think also Reddit is a good source when people are like looking for help. They're posting their questions or thoughts. And when it comes to like resources, also Twitter, or X, nowadays, it's a good place when people can exchange thoughts. Basically, mention htmx_org, so the author of HTMX, and have a discussion and just have a nice chat around various things. Also, memes.
Can you share some examples of successful projects built using HTMX?
That's actually one of the points that might be a bit challenging. There are examples like API Toolkit, which I believe is a observability platform built with HTMX. There is a system or fast application called Context. I'm not sure if I correctly pronounced it, but there are not in my opinion, that many successful stories. So either people are hiding them from the world or not just sharing. But I think we need more of them, especially when people moved from traditional like SPAs, so React-based applications, into HTMX.
What are the biggest challenges developers might face when working with HTMX?
The first thing that comes to my mind was actually mentioned, and it's related to the mind shift, because we got used to working with the SPAs, so single-page applications, and we heavily think in terms of the client-side scripting, client-side state management, using client-side state managers like Mobex, Overmind, Redux, etc. So this is the biggest, in my opinion, obstacle that might make people feel that they are doing something wrong. Also, like we developed some good practices and good patterns, especially in the React ecosystem. And when we are working with hypermedia-driven applications, those patterns, in a way, they might be discovered. Also, when we think about the application architecture and how to structure your solution, there are no guides or official guides. So even as far as I remember, even author Carsten Gross is telling you that you need to find your own way and try to find the perfect spot how your application should be organized. Yeah, so I think this is a bit challenging, especially for people who like enter the industry. Also, one thing that I can mention is that you need to find the good balance between when to use client-side inline JavaScript code and solve problems using that, and when you just need to forget about JavaScript and use your server.
How well does HTMX work alongside other JavaScript libraries like jQuery or Alpine.js?
HTMX on its own is able to bring interactivity onto your browser from server, but still it doesn't closes itself for using jQuery or Alpine.js or similar libraries for increasing the interactions. As mentioned before, Intercooler.js had jQuery as a dependency, so in a way it was using it as a first-class citizen. HTMX gives you this possibility to use your favorite JS library of your choice, like jQuery, and it's really seamless, right? That you can hook jQuery inline scripts or Alpine.js attributes and etc. to increase the interactivity, especially for the canonical examples like collapsible panel, because of the reason you might not need one or want to interact with the server to collapse or expand the panel. You can just write like traditional jQuery to make your panel collapsible without any round trips to the server, and it's perfectly fine.
How does HTMX handle dynamic data update and DOM manipulation?
HTMX comes with something which is called swapping. So the server, based on various selectors, can decide how to swap the parts of the HTML, and there are various strategies for that. A typical use case is HX target attribute that allows you to swap the part of the HTML from the response that comes from the server. Also, more advanced APIs that are called out-of-band swaps for changing parts of the HTML anywhere in your application. And everything is driven by the server. So whatever the server replies with is basically updated in your DOM. Also, we are able to trigger events from the server and use custom JavaScript events to update the DOM at any location, which might be sometimes challenging because you are losing the overview, what updates when and by what, but still it's something maybe to comprehend and understand how to use.
So what is the roadmap of HTMX? Are there any exciting new features on the horizon?
I believe in December there was a version, or at least in 2024, it was an event when the HTMX 2.00 was released. And what made me really wondering was the stability as a feature and no new features as a feature, because HTMX is a minimalistic library when it comes to dependencies. So it really tries to make core as stable as possible so that there are any breaking changes for your application. And I believe it's especially nowadays. So when we hear all those jokes about node modules, transitive dependencies, and the dependency hell, I believe that's also the place where HTML shines. And when it comes to the roadmap, that's a good step into the future by the authors and contributors to keep the core as stable as possible. They also have those extensions that I believe were separated also when it comes to the release cadence, which gives the possibility to iterate much more quickly for those add-ons and still making the core stable.
What are the security considerations when using HTMX, particularly for XSS or CSRF protection?
Yeah, so when it started to become a bit crowdy and loudy when it comes to HTMX and all the topics related to hypermedia-driven applications, one of the, not maybe trash talks, but points that people were mentioning regarding HTMX was the security. And to me, it's a standard operating procedure when people need to take security into account while designing their solutions. So in a way, we should use the common sense. So like not trusting the client input, validating, checking what we are getting from the consumers, meaning the client side. Also escaping the input, whether this is JSON in general or HTML. When it comes to cross-site request forgery, there are some, I would say, traditional practices like setting for the cookie, setting secure HTTP only and same site configurations to basically alleviate CSRF for most of the scenarios. So in a way, it's similar thing when it comes to building SPAs, even when we think about other side of the spectrum, like GraphQL, which has its own problems when it comes to security. Common sense wins, right? So having in mind security and making sure that we think about those things from day zero.
What is your personal experience with HTMX, and where do you see it fitting in the future of web development?
So I had many chances to play with HTMX when I first time saw it. I was very, very excited. So I built some simple applications like to-do apps. Of course, I tried to build some kind of clones of popular portals like Twitter/X in some limited scope. I was able to try to use HTMX for two internal tools with a really limited scope, just to see how to use it in non-customer but commercial landscape, let's say. When it comes to where it fits, I think there is one unexplored territory, especially for those that are building CLI applications, so command line apps. I believe HTMX might be a nice addition when we are already having browsers, right, in the local machines or even when they are used. So instead of just writing CLI apps, we could use your browser and build the server that is able to render beautiful UI and present information in a totally new way that CLI couldn't even imagine having.
Who is the Grok brain developer?
In my mind, it's an avatar or embodiment of a persona that brings back thinking of complexity and taming it in a really Grook way. So there's a page called grookbrain.dev. There are tips and heuristics and some may call principles for developers how to build, test, etc. your applications. And in most cases, it's a common sense, but the main villain there is the complexity. And the famous quote of Grook Brain developer, this avatar or embodiment of fighting complexity, is the following: apex predator of Grook is complexity. And behind the Grook Brain developer, there is Carson Gross, who is author of HTMX, So that's why I call it embodiment of contrarian view, fighting with complexity, because that's why HTMX was born.
Are there any resources you could recommend for people interested in hypermedia-driven applications?
There is a really, really awesome book. You can find it and read it for free under the URL hypermedia.systems. You can just type it in your browser and read it right away. Of course, you can buy a physical copy to support HTMX. It's like, but you can read it for free always. There are a lot of projects on GitHub that you can just browse and see. If you are from Python community, there is a great library called Fast HTML brought to you by Jeremy Howard that I think is a prominent figure from AI ML community. So it builds up the DSL, wrapping HTML attributes, etc. But they have tons of interactive examples on their page. And also there is a one book in Pragmatic Programmers that I believe it's very good for as a starter, because it's full of tiny examples, and throughout the book the reader is building a tiny application. So nothing else beats just practicing.
What kind of person is Damian? How do you see yourself?
Yeah, this is probably the hardest question I have in today's setup. I believe Damian is a person full of ideas, sometimes too wild to be spoken. I envision myself as a person who is a people person that believes in people, because what we are doing on our daily job in our industry is building systems for, with, and by people, right? So that's the central part of my work and thinking, I believe.
Do you have some hints for us regarding self-organization?
I'm a pretty chaotic person, so I struggle with self-organizing. I have a lot of side projects that are unfinished, so it's really hard to give any hint. But I believe it's one hint is to trust yourself. Even if you are starting completely new, it might lead you to a totally new part of world or life.
How do you keep improving your skills as a software developer?
Watching videos on YouTube, reading books, especially those the good and old books from 20 years ago and so on, because there is a lot of the knowledge embedded there. But what is quite vital in my daily work and operating daily is surrounding yourself with people greater than you, in a way, to having a possibility to exchange ideas and collide thoughts, and ensure we remember that nothing great was built when all agreed, give me this power and motivation. So collaborating with people, that's the top secret thing that I would give advice to my past myself.
What is one thing about you that most people don't know?
I'm not sure how many people know that, but on a daily basis, I seem that I'm really an extrovert, right? So I'm typically asking a lot of questions, trying to, fill the room with high spirit, but I really recharge my batteries when I'm alone. I really love being alone with books, with a good music, just, contemplating, just being there.
Last question, favorite travel destination?
Yeah, so I believe that I would like to travel more, but when we went together with my family to Croatia for the first time, I think I fall in love in Balkans in general and this part of the world. So there are a lot of the countries I would like to explore. So yeah, I would say Balkan countries.
Damian, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insights on HTMX. It's been a fantastic conversation. I truly appreciate your time, knowledge, and passion for software design. To all our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Stay curious, keep coding, and see you in the next episode of JavaScript Master Podcast.